Tonight I need you to imagine something. You are told that you are dying, not maybe, not possibly. Dying, the doctors give you 6 months, your body is failing, your children are still young. Your marriage is already hanging by a thread, and just when you think the worst thing that can happen is the illness itself, your husband looks at you, thinks about your funeral before you are even gone, and decides you are no longer worth loving. That is where this story begins, and if you think that is the lowest point, if you think that is the cruelest part, stay with me, because what happened after that was somehow even colder, even uglier, and years later when she finally built a new life from the wreckage. The people who abandoned her came back for one reason: money. Hello everyone and welcome back. Tonight I have 2 stories for you, 2 stories about betrayal, about family, about children caught between truth and manipulation, and about the painful moment when a parent realizes love can be used as a weapon. The first story is heartbreaking, the second one is infuriating. And both of them build toward endings that hit a lot harder than you might expect. So settle in, because this one takes its time, and every reveal matters. I am a woman in my mid-40s. And for obvious reasons, I need to keep some of the details vague. There are parts of my life that still feel raw. There are parts that still feel dangerous. And there are names I will not say out loud. Not because I am ashamed, but because I survived enough already. I met my ex-husband when I was still in my late teens. At that age, everything feels louder than it really is. A little attention feels like destiny. A little affection feels like forever. And when you are young enough to believe love can fix whatever reality puts in front of you, you make promises before you understand the weight of them. We were together for 3 years before I became pregnant. It was not planned. We were not ready. We were not financially stable. We were not living the kind of life where a baby made practical sense. But once it happened, we convinced ourselves that love and effort would be enough. We decided to get married. Looking back now, I can see how much of that decision was fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of failing before we had even begun. Fear of admitting that we had no idea what we were doing. But at the time, it felt like the right thing. Or maybe it just felt like the only thing. He picked up more shifts. I worked as much as I could too, and before we had time to process any of it, our first child was born. For a little while we lived in that strange, exhausted fog that new parents know so well. No sleep, no breathing room, no privacy, no money. But there was still this fragile hope that once we adjusted, things would settle, that we were just in the hard beginning, that every couple goes through rough seasons, that we would come out stronger. Then when our baby was around 9 months old, I found out I was pregnant again. I still remember the feeling in my stomach when I saw the result. Not joy, not excitement, just fear, pure fear. The first pregnancy had taken a serious toll on my health. I was tired all the time. My body never really recovered. Our finances were already stretched so thin that every unexpected bill felt like a small disaster, and the thought of doing it all again so soon felt impossible. I hesitated. I wanted to think. I wanted a real conversation. I wanted space to ask what this would do to me, but my husband pushed hard for us to go through with it. He acted as if there was no real choice. As if my body was just one more burden he expected to carry without complaint. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was the mother of 2. That was not how I imagined my life. I do not think I had some glamorous dream before that. I was never unrealistic, but I did imagine a life where I had more time, more freedom, more say. Instead, I woke up one day and realized I had become a machine for survival. Work, daycare bills, laundry, cooking, cleaning, repeat, repeat, repeat. And while I was drowning in all of that, my marriage began to rot. He resented me for not being intimate enough. That was one of his favorite complaints. As if desire can survive on no sleep and constant stress. As if a woman who works 2 shifts and comes home to small children is supposed to switch herself into romance on command. I would come home with toddlers hanging off me, the house still needing attention, my feet aching, my mind numb, and somehow in his mind my exhaustion was a personal insult. The years blurred together, That is the truth of it, not in a poetic way, not in a beautiful way, just in the brutal way survival years blur. Birthdays happened. School started. Bills kept coming. Arguments became routine. Silence became routine too. I kept telling myself things would improve when the children got older. That once they were more independent, we would finally have room to breathe. But instead, the distance between us got worse. Sharper, colder, more permanent. By the time our older child was 12 and the younger one was 11, I was already living inside a marriage that felt dead. Then came the diagnosis that shattered whatever was left: breast cancer. Even now, I can feel the room when I say it, the smell of the office, the strange stillness after the words left the doctor's mouth, the way time seemed to split. There was my life before that sentence, and there was everything after. The prognosis was grim. The doctors believed I had less than 6 months to live. 6 months. It is a cruel number. Long enough to understand what you are losing, short enough to feel helpless about stopping it. I remember thinking about my children first, not myself, not the pain, not the fear, my children. Who would explain it to them? Who would comfort them? Who would tell them that I did not choose to leave? When my husband found out, I expected shock, grief, even anger, anything human. Instead, he became distant, emotionally sealed off. At first, I tried to be generous. I told myself he was processing. I told myself everyone handles fear differently. I kept making excuses for the silence. Then the truth came out. He wanted a divorce, not after some long, painful conversation, not after some joint decision. He had simply decided. In his mind, I was already gone. A lost cause. A person whose ending was so close that investing any more feeling in me was pointless. And he said something that still makes me feel cold when I remember it. He said it would be better for the children not to watch me die. When I tell you those words destroyed something in me, I am not exaggerating. I was already sick, already terrified, already trying to come to terms with the possibility that I might not live long enough to see my children grow up. And the person who was supposed to stand beside me looked at my illness like an inconvenience he could solve by leaving. That was the moment I broke. Not all at once, not in a dramatic scene. It was quieter than that, more dangerous than that. I just stopped seeing a point, stopped fighting in my own mind, stopped believing there was anything left worth reaching for. One of my physicians noticed. I think doctors can tell when a patient is slipping in more ways than one. He told me there was an experimental medication showing promising results. He said it was not guaranteed. He said it came with risks. He said there was still a path forward if I wanted to try. At first I hesitated, and this is the part that still hurts to admit. I had not seen my children in over 3 weeks. Every time I called my ex-husband, he either hung up on me or blocked access to them. He was already controlling the narrative, already keeping them from me, already deciding what my last chapter with them would look like. I felt weak, humiliated, disposable. Part of me thought, what is the point of fighting to live if the life waiting for me has already been taken apart? But another part of me held on. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the last stubborn piece of me that refused to disappear on his schedule. I agreed to the treatment. It worked. Not perfectly, not painlessly, not without cost, but it worked. The tumors were mostly in my right breast, and I needed a mastectomy. There was no easy version of that. No emotionally clean way to wake up after surgery and meet the new shape of your own body. But the doctors were optimistic. For the first time in months, there was real hope. The kind that feels almost unreal because you had already started grieving yourself. I thought maybe this would change everything. Maybe my husband would see that I was still here. Maybe he would remember I was more than a body. Maybe he would remember vows. Maybe he would remember basic decency. I told him the good news. We met in person. He took one look at me and said he was no longer attracted to me. That was it. That was his answer, not relief. Not gratitude, not even a polite lie, just that in my fragile state he did not see a woman he wanted anymore. And because of that, he saw no reason to stay. He said he would continue with the divorce. There are moments in life when pain becomes so concentrated it almost turns silent. That was one of them. I do not remember arguing. I do not remember defending myself. I just remember feeling hollow. Like all the blood had drained out of my future. To say I fell into depression would not be enough. Depression sounds clinical. Contained. What I felt was more like collapse. A total collapse of identity. My family had been my entire world for 12 years, not because I had a rich social life outside of them, not because I had endless hobbies or backup plans. They were the shape of my life, and suddenly that entire shape was gone. The divorce papers arrived in the mail. I let them sit there for a week. I ignored the calls, ignored the messages, ignored the reality as long as I could. Then I signed. People talk about signing papers like it is an administrative thing, a step, a process, but sometimes a signature is a burial. Sometimes it is the moment you stop pretending that what you lost can still be recovered. I wish I could tell you I stood up after that and immediately rebuilt myself. I did not. There was no inspiring montage, no sudden clarity, no elegant transformation. I was devastated, completely. But eventually I forced myself outside, not because I was strong. Because staying still felt worse. I started trying things I never imagined I would. Small things at first, anything that could make me feel even briefly connected to the world again. That is when I found rock climbing. I know that probably sounds strange. It sounded strange to me too, but there was something about it that made sense the moment my hands touched the wall. The effort, the pain, the concentration, the way every movement demanded that I stay in the present, not in the past, not in the what-ifs, just one hold, then another, then another. And at the top there was this reward, a view, a breath, a moment where all the struggle below you meant something. I fell in love with it, not the glamorous version of love, not the easy version. The kind of love that saves your life because it gives your body a reason to keep moving. Over the next 8 years, I became an avid climber. I grew stronger, not in a movie way, in a real way. Scar tissue and all, I learned my body was still mine, still capable, still worthy of carrying me somewhere beautiful, and through climbing I met the man who would become my husband. We did not start as some whirlwind romance. Thank God, I do not think I could have survived that. We were friends first, for a whole year. He was patient with my trust issues, patient with my caution, patient with my silences. He never tried to rush me into becoming some healed version of myself for his convenience. He just stayed steady. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. Not because I was naive, because I knew exactly what steadiness was worth. By then I had also grown close to his family, and especially to his daughter. She was not mine biologically. But love has never cared much about biology when it is real. Our relationship developed naturally, gently, until one day I realized loving her felt as instinctive as breathing. So marrying him did not feel like stepping into a stranger's life. It felt like finally being welcomed into one. My husband is a lawyer at a prominent firm in our city. We live comfortably. Not extravagantly in the way people imagine, but comfortably, securely. And his daughter had a trust fund set aside for her. She was approaching 18, driven, focused, career-oriented. She had been accepted into an Ivy League university and planned to use the money to support that future. I was proud of her, truly proud. She worked hard and knew exactly who she wanted to become. And then one post changed everything. She made a public thank you post, just a heartfelt message. She thanked her parents. She thanked her extended family. And she thanked me for supporting her goals and standing beside her through the years. That was all. A sweet post. A simple post. An ordinary post. But my biological children saw it. For 9 years, my attempts to contact them had been rejected. Every call brushed aside. Every effort ignored. Every message left unanswered. They made it painfully clear that they wanted nothing to do with me. I suspected their father had something to do with that. I suspected it deeply. But suspicion is not proof. And when your children shut the door on you again, and again, you start to wonder if maybe they really do not want you. Maybe they really did choose life without you. Then suddenly after seeing that post they reappeared. Not with apologies, not with questions, not with grief over lost years, with demands, messages, calls, more messages, and not just to me. To my stepdaughter too, asking for money, hinting at what they thought they deserved, acting as if motherhood could be switched back on for their benefit now that wealth was attached to my name. I was stunned, I felt sick, and I felt trapped between two forms of heartbreak. The first heartbreak was obvious, my own children only reaching out when they thought there was money to gain. But the second heartbreak was subtler, because underneath the anger there was also a terrible hope, a cruel hope, the kind that whispers maybe this is my chance to get them back. Maybe if I answer carefully, maybe if I tolerate enough, maybe if I give enough, maybe I can be their mother again. That kind of hope can destroy you, because it makes you vulnerable to anything. My husband saw how shaken I was. He was understanding, supportive, but he also knew this situation could get worse quickly if we did not address it. I did not know what to do. That was where things stood when I first shared my story. I was drowning in confusion. I was angry at my ex-husband, hurt by my children, protective of my stepdaughter, and ashamed that some part of me still wanted my children to choose me for reasons that had nothing to do with money. People urged me to confront my ex-husband. They said the pattern was obvious. They said he had manipulated them. They said I needed boundaries before the harassment spread further into my new family. Eventually, I took that advice. I called him. I warned him that if he kept harassing my family, I would pursue a restraining order. He argued back immediately, not defensively, not nervously, entitled, as if he had been waiting for a fight. He accused me of never caring enough to rebuild the relationship, as if the years of blocked calls and rejected attempts had not happened. As if he had not been the one who cut me out while I was fighting for my life. He spoke like a man who had rewritten history so many times that he believed his own version. It was obvious he felt entitled to my resources, to my husband's money, to access he had never earned. I ended the call furious, but once the anger burned off, what remained was something worse. Doubt. Had I been a bad mother? Had I failed them? Had I not fought hard enough? Had I left too much room for their father to poison them against me? Was their rejection a result of his manipulation? Or was it proof that somewhere along the way I had truly lost them? Those questions can eat you alive, especially when there is no immediate answer. Then the situation escalated. My stepdaughter began describing incidents that sounded less like harassment and more like stalking. A man lingering, watching, showing up where he should not have been. The details piled up until I felt physically ill. I was certain it was my ex-husband. Imagine that for a second. You rebuild your life from almost nothing. You survive illness, abandonment, divorce. Years of silence from your own children. You finally create a safe home. And then the ghost of your old life starts circling the people you love now. I urged my husband to act. With the evidence we pursued a restraining order, and we got it. After that, the harassment stopped. On paper, that sounds like victory, and in a legal sense, maybe it was. But emotionally, it did not feel clean. My stepdaughter was deeply disturbed by the experience. I hated what it had done to her sense of safety, and I could not shake the guilt. I kept thinking if I had never entered their lives, maybe they would have been happier. Maybe my husband and his daughter would have been left in peace. Maybe this chaos followed me. Maybe I brought it with me. My husband did everything he could to reassure me. He told me none of it was my fault. He told me my ex-husband made his own choices. He told me guilt was not the same as responsibility. I heard every word. I wanted to believe him, but guilt is stubborn. It does not leave just because someone loving tells it to. Then after some time had passed, something happened that I did not expect. My eldest biological child reached out, not to ask for money, not to make another demand. He reached out to say he felt guilty for the provocative messages. He said he wanted to apologize to my stepdaughter in person. I was not comfortable with that. I did not want him near her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But hearing his voice did something to me. It reminded me how much of his life I had missed. That is the cruelty of estrangement. People think anger is the main feeling. Sometimes it is, but often it is grief. Grief for birthdays you did not see, for milestones you learned about from silence, for versions of your child that existed without you. After a lot of thought, I agreed to stay in touch with him, carefully, cautiously, not because trust had been restored, because I wanted to know my child, even now, even late, even damaged. And slowly, I learned why both of my children had stayed away for so long. Their father had told them that after my cancer diagnosis, I wanted to end the relationship myself. He told them I was trying to spare them the pain. He convinced them that if they did not go along with the distance, then I would never have had the strength to let them go. He framed abandonment as sacrifice, cruelty as mercy, manipulation as protection, and they believed him. That revelation shook me more than I can fully explain. Because suddenly the lost years looked different, not less painful, but different. My children had not simply looked at me and decided I was disposable. They had been lied to. Shaped by a man who weaponized my illness and used their love for me as leverage. I do not say that to erase their choices. They still made them. They still hurt me. But understanding the lie behind those years changed the shape of the wound. For now, I chose to stay in contact with my eldest child. Only him, only carefully. He said he would speak to his younger sibling when the time was right. I told myself time would reveal who they really were, whether there was remorse, whether there was accountability, whether there could ever be something honest between us again. And that is where the first story pauses, not with a perfect reunion, not with a dramatic revenge scene, but with something far more difficult, uncertainty, the kind that asks for patience when your heart wants closure, the kind that leaves you staring at the phone long after the call ends, the kind that forces you to hold two truths at once. You were deeply wronged, and yet the people who hurt you may also have been hurt in order to hurt you. But before you decide how you feel about that story, I want to tell you another one, because this next story carries a different kind of pain, not the pain of being erased by illness. The pain of raising a child with your whole soul, only to watch someone else slowly twist the way he sees you. I am a 43-year-old woman, and I have a 24-year-old son. I had him very young. His father wanted nothing to do with us. The moment he learned I was pregnant, he left. No dramatic explanation, no promise to stay in touch, no effort, he was just gone. So I raised my son alone, not truly alone in the emotional sense. My parents helped me, my family helped me, I was fortunate in that way. While I finished my degree and worked my way through university, they stood beside me and helped me care for him. Without them, I do not know how I would have made it. But materially and emotionally, the responsibility still sat on me. I was the mother. I was the provider. I was the one awake at night wondering how to make the math of life work. My 20s did not look the way I imagined either. I missed out on a lot. Sleep, freedom, spontaneity. The kind of youth people take for granted, but I never regretted my son, not once. He was my best friend for years, or at least that is how it felt. Then he met Grace. That is not her real name, but it will do. They met in high school. At first I did not mind the relationship. I have always tried to be a liberal but firm mother. I had honest conversations with my son about sex, about pregnancy, about responsibility. I made my expectations clear. And to his credit, he understood. He did not make reckless choices. He seemed grounded. But once he started dating Grace, I noticed something changing. He became more distant. And yes, there is a normal version of that. Teenagers grow. Teenagers pull away. Teenagers want privacy. I knew that. I expected that. This felt different. He stopped wanting to spend time with me. He stopped having real conversations. He did not simply want space. He wanted separation, as though closeness itself had become embarrassing. I kept asking myself if I had done something wrong. Had I been too involved, too strict, too available, too protective? I could not figure it out. Then I met Grace in person. The second I saw her, I understood. She hated me, not quietly. Not subtly enough to miss. I could see it in the way she looked at me, the little edge in her smile. the way every polite sentence seemed to carry something sharp underneath it. At dinner, she made snide comments about how lonely I must be, how hard it must have been to work long hours without a partner. She talked as if my life was a cautionary tale she had already judged. She was deeply opinionated and absolutely convinced that her opinions were wisdom. From what I could gather, she despised the fact that I chose to remain a single parent instead of dating around. She seemed to believe that by not finding a man, I had somehow failed my son, that I had monopolized his life, that if I had given him a father figure, he would have become more of a real man. Imagine sitting across from a teenage girl while she explains your own life to you with contempt. This happened around 6 months into their relationship. I saw the red flags immediately. I tried to talk to my son. I told him I was concerned. He dismissed me right away. He said Grace made him happy. He said I needed to respect his individuality. I understood that he wanted to defend the girl he loved, but what I heard underneath it was worse. He was already starting to see me through her eyes. I hoped they would break up. I will be honest about that. I hoped the relationship would run its course and end like many young relationships do, but it did not. They stayed together, and year after year the red flags multiplied. I kept noticing them, I kept feeling more alarmed, and I kept realizing I was the only one who seemed truly disturbed. Still, I tried to be happy for him. I tried not to become the bitter mother who cannot let go. I tried to believe that if I stayed patient, he would eventually see what I saw. Then 2 months ago, they announced their engagement. I was surprised, more than surprised, I was worried, but my son looked happy, so I forced myself to meet the moment with love. Because what else do you do when the child you raised is standing in front of you offering his future with shining eyes? You swallow your fear, you smile, you try. During the wedding planning, my mother reminded me of a family tradition. After weddings, we break a plate. It is playful, ceremonial, a small custom handed down through generations. I had never gotten married myself, so I had never gotten to take part in it as a bride. But I thought introducing it to my future daughter-in-law would be a lovely way to honor our heritage. A bridge between old and new. When I brought it up, Grace laughed, not politely, not with confusion. She laughed at me. She said I should abandon my culture because we were in America now. She said Americans do not engage in uncivilized behavior like smashing expensive china to preserve outdated traditions from the old country. I was shocked, actually shocked. And before I could even process what I had heard, my son sided with her. He told me I should adapt to the times. He said I needed to let go of the tradition. Then he went even further. He said that because he was born in America and his father was American, he felt no connection to that part of his heritage anyway. That sentence hit me like a slap. Do you know what it feels like to carry culture quietly for years? To preserve it in food and stories and family habits? To pass it down in whatever ways you can? And then hear your own child dismiss it like dead weight because someone else taught him to be embarrassed by it. I ended the conversation. What else could I do? Stay there and beg them to respect me. Beg them to respect where I came from. No, I left it there. But they did not. Soon social media filled with passive-aggressive posts, not direct enough to call me out by name, but obvious enough for everyone to know who they meant. Post after post painting me as controlling, old-fashioned, difficult. The villain mother who could not let the happy couple live their modern American life. It was humiliating, and it was heartbreaking. At the same time, something important had happened in my own life. After years of saving, budgeting, working, denying myself luxuries, I had bought a cozy house in the suburbs. It bordered a beautiful forest, quiet, peaceful. The kind of place I had dreamed about for years. The original plan was to host the wedding there. My son loved the natural setting. He wanted trees and open sky, and that soft, peaceful feeling in the background of the ceremony. A backyard wedding would save them money, and I was willing to give them that. Willing to share the home I worked so hard to build. Then the posts kept coming. One, then another, then another. By the 5th one I was done. I called them, and told them I would not be hosting the wedding at my house anymore. I said they were no longer welcome to use my property. I told them they should find a venue that better suited the American wedding they seemed so eager to have. They exploded, name-calling, accusations, outrage. And in that moment, I made another decision, one I know many people would consider extreme. I decided my son would no longer receive the inheritance he expected from me. Not because he disagreed with me, because of the sustained disrespect, because of the cruelty, because I could see him treating me not as a mother, but as a resource he could shame into obedience. After that, my phone became a battlefield. Voicemails from my son begging me to reconsider while Grace screamed in the background. Other messages that were just angry rants. Blame, insults, pressure. And of course word got around. Soon other people were messaging too, calling me heartless, asking how I could do this to my own son, telling me I was overreacting. Then one night he showed up at my door drunk. He banged on the door, cried, slurred his words, begged me to let him in. I did not open it. That may sound cold, maybe it was. But I had reached the point where every time I softened he seemed to become more entitled. I needed a boundary, a real one, not one I explained with tears and apologies. One made of silence and a locked door. He stayed on my porch for about 3 hours before someone came to get him. And while I stood behind that door, listening to my son fall apart outside my house, I faced one of the worst realizations a parent can face. The possibility that the child you poured your life into has grown into someone you do not recognize, someone who sees your love as leverage, someone who has confused access with ownership, someone who thinks respect is optional. I also learned something else. Grace had always wanted to live in the suburbs. My house was her dream. And apparently, if I did not provide that dream, the marriage itself might not go forward, because she expected my son to act like a provider. In other words, the wedding venue was never just a venue. My home was part of the fantasy she planned to step into. I thought about telling him to work hard and solve his own problems. I thought about saying 100 things, but in the end, I said nothing. Silence again. Sometimes silence is the only thing left when words have been spent for years. I shared that story because I felt torn. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt justified. I did not know whether I was protecting myself or punishing him. Maybe both. People responded with kindness. Many said I was not at fault. They asked why I never married after having my son. The answer is simple. I realized I did not need a man to provide for us. I could support my son and myself if I worked hard enough. My brothers were positive male figures in his life. He was loved by family. I never believed marriage was required in order to create a good home. As for my son, there was silence for a while after that drunken night. Only a few voicemails from Grace blaming me for everything, and I could not escape the fear that maybe I had lost him for good. Then another turn came. He and Grace broke up. My son came over to tell me, and what struck me most was that he did not seem shattered the way I expected. Not exactly. He seemed almost clearer, as if some fog had lifted. He asked whether I had always known Grace was not the one. I did not answer. Maybe because the answer was obvious. Maybe because I did not want to rub salt into a fresh wound. Maybe because sometimes the truth arriving late is painful enough without hearing it confirmed. He admitted he should have listened to me. He said Grace had been primarily interested in our wealth. She wanted a lavish life, and once she realized I would not hand over the inheritance or the house, her doubts about him grew until the relationship collapsed. I felt sorry for him. Of course I did. He was still my son, but there was also a strange sadness in how unsurprised I was. When you watch someone you love walk toward a cliff for years, the actual fall is tragic but not shocking. That night we talked over hot cocoa, just like we used to when he was younger, and for the first time in a long time I felt something like hope. Small hope, careful hope. The kind that does not trust itself yet, but hope all the same. He stayed with me for a few days. We talked about what had happened, about what works, about what does not. About how he had ignored things that should have concerned him, Some people also pointed out that Grace's comments had not just been rude, they were racist. And whether my son recognized that at the time or not, I needed to know why he tolerated it. I wanted to understand how he had drifted so far from the values I thought I had raised him with. That is where the second story pauses. Not with a wedding, not with a dramatic showdown, with a broken engagement, a shaken son, a mother who is relieved and wounded at the same time. And a relationship that might still be saved if both people are honest enough to rebuild it. When you place these two stories side by side, something painful becomes clear. In the first story, a mother was erased by a lie. Her illness was turned against her. Her children were guided away from her by a father who dressed cruelty up as protection. And when money appeared, those old wounds exploded back open. Yet even there, the ending held a faint possibility that truth might recover what manipulation stole. In the second story, a mother was not erased all at once. She was chipped away at slowly, mocked, undervalued, used. Watched as her son drifted toward a woman who treated her culture and sacrifice like punchlines. Yet even there, when the illusion collapsed, he found his way back to her door. Both stories are really about the same terror. Not just losing people, losing your place in the story of their lives, being recast as the problem after years of love. Watching someone else rewrite your role, until the child you raised no longer knows how to look at you without suspicion or shame. And if you are listening to this as a parent, maybe that fear hits close. Because the hardest part of parenthood is not the sleepless nights, or the bills, or the sacrifices. It is knowing that love does not guarantee understanding. You can give someone everything you have, your youth, your body, your peace, your dreams, and still one lie, one partner. One manipulative voice can come in and teach them to doubt the very hands that raised them. That is what makes these stories hurt. The first woman nearly died. And when she lived, the man who should have been grateful discarded her anyway. She spent years climbing literal rock walls to build back the self he tried to bury. She learned how to survive without the family she thought defined her. And just when she finally found peace, her past came knocking with open hands, not to love her, to take from her. But in the end, the truth cracked through. Not fully, not neatly, but enough to show her that the years of silence were built on poison. Enough to let one son say I was wrong. Enough to remind her that sometimes what breaks a family is not always a lack of love. Sometimes it is a lie told often enough to sound like love. The second woman gave her son stability through sheer force of will. She built a future with tired hands and a stubborn heart. She carried culture and sacrifice and dignity into a life that was never easy. Then she watched a girl come in and teach her son to be ashamed of everything that made him. Ashamed of his mother. Ashamed of his heritage, ashamed of gratitude itself. And when she finally drew a line, he called her cruel. Others called her cruel too, but that line saved something. Maybe not the relationship immediately, but her self-respect. And sometimes that is the first thing that must be saved if a relationship is ever going to heal. The details are different. The wounds are different, but both women reached the same brutal lesson. If you do not protect your dignity, someone else will spend it. If you do not defend your peace, someone else will invade it. If you keep every door open out of guilt, the wrong people will keep walking through. And yet neither story ends in total darkness. That is important. Because it would be easy to end here with bitterness. Easy to say people never change. Children never come back, truth never wins, but that would not be honest. Sometimes people do come back, late. Damaged, ashamed, confused, not as the children you remember, not in the clean way you prayed for, but they come back. Sometimes truth does arrive, slowly, after years, after damage. After you have already built a life without it. And when it finally does, it does not erase what happened, but it can give pain a shape you can survive. Sometimes healing is not a reunion. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is a restraining order. Sometimes it is a locked door. Sometimes it is a hot drink at the kitchen table while two people admit they almost lost each other. Sometimes healing is simply refusing to let the lie be the final version of your life. If you made it all the way through these stories, then you know this was never just about money or weddings or trust funds or social media posts. It was about what happens when love is tested by selfishness, by illness, by manipulation, by greed, by shame. And about what it costs to rebuild yourself after people you would have died for decide you are useful only on their terms. That is why the ending hits so hard for me. Because somewhere out there is a woman who was told she had 6 months to live and survived anyway, only to learn that surviving does not automatically restore what was stolen. And somewhere else is a woman who gave her son everything she could and had to watch him nearly trade his soul for the promise of status and comfort. Both of them kept going. Both of them kept loving. Even when love stopped feeling safe, even when family stopped feeling like home, and maybe that is the real heart of this video, not that people can be terrible, we know that already. It is that some people remain capable of love after being treated terribly, and that kind of strength is not loud, it is not glamorous, it is not cinematic, it is quiet, scarred, careful, and unbelievably brave. So if you are out there carrying guilt for wounds other people created, if you are blaming yourself because someone manipulated your children, if you are grieving a relationship that got twisted by lies, if you are wondering whether drawing a boundary makes you heartless, let these stories say something plainly. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to refuse access to people who only remember your value when they need something. You are allowed to keep the door closed until respect arrives with the apology. And you are allowed to believe that loving someone does not mean letting them destroy you. If these stories stayed with you, if they made you angry, if they broke your heart, if they reminded you of something in your own life, tell me in the comments. I want to know which part hit you the hardest. Was it the husband who abandoned his wife when she got cancer? Was it the children coming back for money? Was it the son siding against his mother and mocking his own roots? Or was it those final moments when the truth finally began to surface? And if you believe stories like these matter. If you want more long-form storytelling that takes its time and really lets the emotions sink in, make sure you subscribe right now. Like this video if you want more stories that go deeper than the surface. And comment below because every comment tells the platform this is the kind of storytelling worth pushing to more people. If you have your own story and want it featured on the channel, you can send it through the contact in the description. And if you made it to the end of this video type, I stayed for the truth in the comments so I know who really rode this whole emotional journey with me. Take care of yourselves. Protect your peace. And I will see you in the next one.